Good evening, everybody. Another episode of Howling with the Wolf. I want to let everybody get in, and we'll go ahead and jump straight into it. We're discussing the Dolphins QB merry-go-round. That's what we're calling it. Seemingly every week, we've got a different change here, and the latest is Ryan Fitzpatrick running the ship. I want to talk about that decision. I know there's been a lot of talk about what that means and why it happened, whether Brian Flores was right, whether it's fair for Josh Rosen, what it means for Josh Rosen long term. We're going to get into all that. I want to talk about trade deadline rumblings. There's been some discussion about King and Drake. I want to get my thoughts on Jalen Ramsey. Some of these other players are getting traded with the deadline about 2 weeks away. And I want to go ahead and talk about the AFC East and what the direction is of each team. The Dolphins are playing the Buffalo Bills this week. Division matchup, get Frank Gore in there. And as always, I'll give you some insight inside the locker room, inside the Dolphins kind of world that I live in on a daily basis. So let's go ahead and get to the action. As always, this is my domain for y'all. Questions, fire them away, and I'll do my best to try to give you all the real. So first things first, I just want to talk about this merry-go-round. You guys ever been on a super fast, like merry-go-round type ride? You know, not one of those kid rides where, you know, it goes slowly and the music is playing and, you know, everybody's just going around cruising. One of those faster ones, like the adult type merry-go-rounds. That's the Dolphins QB situation where nobody is quite sure when it's going to stop and who's going to be the next contestant on the ride. But this week we've got Ryan Fitzpatrick going back home to Buffalo, and I know it surprised a lot of folks. It surprised some of us that they're pulling the string on Josh Rosen after just 3 games. Here's the biggest thing that I thought about when I saw that news, and you know I've talked a little bit about this on ESPN.com, but this platform is for me to give you guys a little bit more of what I don't discuss. I think the Dolphins pretty much decided that they know what they've got in Josh Rosen, and it's not good enough. You know, for better or for worse, they have seen from April when he got here to now, and they decided that it's not worth seeing more of, at least immediately, whether he's a quarterback in the future. I think early on they thought there was a good chance they would draft a quarterback high in the 2020 draft, Tua. But I think that this kind of was, in my opinion, one of the final blows to the hope that maybe Josh Rosen convinced them otherwise. You don't bench your franchise quarterback in the future essentially 2 weeks in a row. Sunday against Washington, and then again Wednesday after they said that he would be the starter. So, you know, Brian Flores didn't come out and say that, but he did say they feel like they have a pretty good evaluation of Josh Rosen. And, you know, I've heard a lot of the national TV narrative of, you know, Josh Rosen getting screwed again. And, you know, what are they doing? The Dolphins are kind of like chaotic, and, you know, why would they make this decision? They're in over his head. And, you know, I could see a lot of that angle, but I choose to look at it this way. The Dolphins went, 7 years with Ryan Tannehill, right? And, you know, he maybe was, average to slightly above average, depending on when he was playing quarterback. And I think that, you know, they waited too long. I think everybody would agree with that. And I think when they went upon this new rebuild, they decided the worst thing we could do, whether it's the quarterback position, whether it's the team, whether it's anything, is settle for good enough. And, you know, Josh Rosen, in my opinion, they felt like his best case scenario, his ceiling might have been good enough. And that brings about the question, why would you trade for him? I don't know. I don't think that they should have traded for him in this situation, but they have, and this is what they have at this point. So I think that, you know, they decided that, you know, he's still got a ways to go to be that good enough quarterback. And instead of putting him out there essentially to the Wolves, where this Buffalo Bills defense is on the road, they'd rather go with the veteran, hold him back. And I think, in my opinion, this is not my reporting, it's just my opinion, at some point Josh Rosen ends up getting traded again next offseason. And hopefully he goes somewhere where he has, you know, a little bit of a better chance to see, you know, exactly who he is. But I will say that, you know, from what we saw of Josh Rosen, you know, he mentioned it on his own accord, struggled with anticipation. That's something that was, you know, a consistent thing for him early in his career. He struggled with some of the mic points, some of the protection issues, and that's something that you see with a lot of young quarterbacks in this team just didn't have enough around him to for him to like be insulated. And for me, young quarterback, a lot of times we see Patrick Mahomes, we see some of these other guys, Deshaun Watson, and I think for this type of roster, they needed that type of quarterback for him to succeed immediately. And that's why I think Tua resonates so much with a lot of people, because he has that mobility factor, that it factor, that playmaking ability that maybe he can excel outside of a terrible offensive line or the lack of playmakers. And Josh Rosen, he's just not that quarterback. He's not mobile. He's more of a system guy. He needs to be insulated. So for better or for worse, it just wasn't a great fit for him. And Josh to us has been really good. I didn't see a lot of the terrible personality stuff that everybody was talking about. I think he was fine in that respect. But I do think that his tenure in Miami, in my opinion, in mid-October, I just don't think it's going to be very long. So that's kind of my take on that. As far as this week and this quarterback decision, I think if you boil it down to just who gives you the best chance to win, I think it's hard to argue with Ryan Flores that Ryan Fitzpatrick probably gives them the better chance to win, particularly this week. So got a comment here from Crispy Chicken 30. That's a cool name. It says, best case scenario, Rosen's a backup for the next few years. Let me dive into that a little bit. I think Josh Rosen, I've said this on the radio, whether it's locally on, the Joe Rose Show or some of the other local radio shows that I do out here from time to time. But I think Josh Rosen has the arm talent to be one of the top 32, maybe one of the top 20 starting quarterbacks in the NFL for years and years to come. The question for him has always been the intangibles, not necessarily, the intangibles you think as far as like, I think a lot of it's just the mechanics of being a quarterback. Like I mentioned earlier, anticipation. He's thrown late on a lot of passes. Like the Allen Hurns throw back in Dallas, I think he would admit to you that was his fault. The throw that got Allen Hurns a concussion, that was Josh Rosen being late in his throw. He was open. He saw him late. There's been several other throws where he's been late. His timing's been off. He's a little bit slow in the pocket as far as his mental clock. So those are things that, will it increase, and get better at time? We don't know. But he hasn't really been able to have the right environment to see if it has a chance to be there. But those elements are not good enough to be a starting quarterback right now. The elements that Fitz has, and I actually asked him about this in Tampa, and he said intangibles are the reason why he's in the league. He excels in leading the team. When we watched him in that fourth quarter, you could see guys on the sidelines galvanizing Fitz. Like, I joked with him after the game, when did you feel the magic? And he said, when did you feel it? I felt it early on. But, like, for real, there's like I hate to use the word magic, but there's like an energy that you have to have, I think, as a, it factor as a quarterback. And I think, Fitz has shown that, and maybe it kind of rubs off on the teammates. And I think that's something Rosen may have to grow into. So, I think that, it's too early to say he's a career backup and he's a bust and he'll never be a starter. I think he probably is going to get another chance to start for another team, and probably this team throughout the rest of the year. But I just think that he still has some growing. He's raw as a quarterback. He may be like where Dwayne Haskins is, maybe a little further than where Dwayne Haskins is in Washington. So I think that, he's going to need an opportunity, maybe in an insulated scheme, to show where he is. So I'd love to see him in a place where they already have an established quarterback and he can kind of learn from that person from a little bit and, maybe get thrust into action a year or so down the line. So that's my thoughts on Rosen. Let's jump into another topic. As always, fire away your questions. Pop over every few minutes or so and check what you guys are talking about. But the other topic I wanted to talk about is trade rumblings. If you guys kind of follow, NFL news, trades have started to pop up recently. Jalen Ramsey, who I think is the best cornerback in the league, is been traded away to the Los Angeles Rams, 2 first-round picks. There's been a lot of other names on the market. I think one name that a lot of Dolphins fans, have heard, and I've kind of reported on it. Ian Rappaport put a report on it. But Kenyon Drake, and I'll talk about Kenyon Drake, and then I'll talk about the rest of the league trade things first. First things first, I think that it's more likely, and this is my opinion, some reporting, some kind of like educated guess based on my reporting, but I would say at this point, I think it's more likely than not that Kenyon Drake, gets traded. I think that when you look at the situation, the Dolphins have had Kenyon Drake for 4 years, and I think he has believed that he's, the man probably could see him better utilized in a different environment. And he's still a playmaker. He's still an explosive back. I'd say, if they can get a fourth rounder, maybe even a fifth rounder for a team, I think they probably pull the trigger. We talked to Kenyon Drake today, and he said he hasn't had a chance to essentially he hasn't talked to the team or had any notable talks with the team about any trade, or contract extensions. And for a guy who's, essentially going into his contract year, I think that's sort of the big sign that, hey, you're not a part of our future. So I think that there's a decent chance they'll trade him. He's a guy who essentially just has not been the future back, which isn't like a knock on him. I think his best skill set is his playmaking ability, his ability to make big plays. So I think if you put him on a playmaker, a contender team that has another back, maybe a bruising back, and you put him in as a receiving back, he can make plays. I think he can help you win a game or two. We saw that in the Miami Miracle a year ago. So I'd love to see him on a contending team. I think the Dolphins, I think for them, they're probably going to look at a situation where if he leaves in free agency, which is probably likely if he doesn't get traded, then he's probably going to go away for nothing. The Dolphins are probably going to be active in free agency, so whatever comp pick they were hoping to get is not going to be activated because they're going to sign too many free agents. So this is their best chance to get value out of them. I think if they get a fourth or fifth round pick from any team, they probably make the trigger. So, Mark Walden, who I actually have a story coming out with on tomorrow, early plug, I think is kind of showing them he's a fourth round pick last year's draft. Kalen Ballage, a fourth round pick in last year's draft. Those two guys, they'll have a chance to see those two guys in action in the backfield over the second half of the season if they trade Kenyon Drake, and that'll give them an idea of whether they need to add another running back or fix that position. So that's kind of what I think about the Kenyon Drake situation. I hear some people talking about Kenyon Drake doesn't help his cause sometimes. I think that his skill set is what it is. Like the biggest thing I've kind of learned with running backs in the NFL, a lot of times you try to change who they are. Like Kenyon Drake, can you run a little bit, more up the middle, or can you not, get all these big losses or not hit the spin button as much as you do? But if you take away that, you take away what makes them them. So I think Kenyon Drake is who he is, and I don't think it's a negative. I just think that he's probably better as a 10 to 12 to maybe 15 touch a game back, along with another back and a really explosive offense. And I think you could utilize his playmaking ability that way. So I hope he gets a chance to, kind of succeed in that area. A couple people had some comments about Josh Rosen that I wanted to get into. A lot of people use this kind of line, and I'll talk about this a little bit, talking about offensive alignment and the fact that he doesn't have an offensive line. This is very much true. And I've kind of battled this for a while because Josh Rosen didn't have an offensive line or weapons around him in Arizona. He doesn't have an offensive line. He has limited weapons around him in Miami. So should that be an excuse for him? Should that be something where you say you can't truly judge him because of that? Possibly, but I think for the Dolphins situation, they decided early on that they were going to use this as a one-year tryout for Josh Rosen. So for people saying it's not fair for Josh Rosen, that's the same argument that people should have made in April, because this situation isn't very different than what he had coming in April, that his offensive line was going to be terrible. His receivers were going to be kind of a mismatched group. It became even worse than what we thought, but I think it ended up being a mismatched group of rookies and kind of journeyman veterans. So he wasn't going to have an ideal situation. I always compare it to a poker hand. He's got a 7-10 offsuit poker hand, and he's got to find a way to win a hand out of it. So, yeah, it's not necessarily ideal for him, but it's the NFL. It's not ideal for anybody. So, I mean, I think, I feel like, a lot of quarterbacks get chances that a lot of players wouldn't necessarily get. There's been a bunch of players who have went to ideal situations and didn't work out, and we don't necessarily use some of the team excuses for them. So I think Josh Rosen is going to get another chance for another team. So I don't think that this is the end of the road for him, but I think that you have to look at what can he do, even in a protected pocket. I've looked at some of the next-gen stats. Even when Josh Rosen has been protected and there's not pressures, his numbers are low. Even when he's been in a situation where, receivers are open, or he's been able to have what we call a quote-unquote good situation, the numbers haven't been great. So I think he's still in his development where, he's still young. And I think that he holds some responsibility in how he's performed so far. The offensive line and the teams do too, but he has as well. So I don't think like completely sort of, I guess, saying that he has no role in this benching or has no role in what is going on is fair to anybody, because that's sort of giving him a free pass, and I think he wouldn't want that. I think he would want to be criticized on his play just as much as any other player would. So I think that Josh Rosen still has a lot of chance to be, good in this league. I do. I think that he can be a good starting quarterback. But for now, I don't have any issue with the Dolphins, doing what they're probably going to end up doing, which is drafting a quarterback in 2020 and saying that, you got to ship Josh Rosen elsewhere. So offensive line bad, yes. Situation not ideal for Josh Rosen, yes. But Josh Rosen's played his role and not playing well over the last 2 years. And I think he'll get another chance. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. Let me see what you guys are talking about in here. They're talking about letting go of proven talent is dumb. Build a scheme around them. It's not fair to the players. I'll talk about this a little bit, and then I want to talk a little bit about a fun story that we discussed about Brian Flores and Frank Gore earlier this week, and I want to give my thoughts on the AFC East kind of direction of each of those teams, and then we'll bounce out of there. I think that this organization has kind of made a conscious decision that, hey, 2019 is essentially going to be a year where tank may not be the right word that the Dolphins love, but whatever you say, endure pain, whatever you call it, they've decided that we're going to take this. So players have essentially been collateral damage. Players in their development, and especially the developed guys or the premier guys. Like, I think this year has not helped Xavier Howard at all. He was ascending to what I think was a top 5 quarterback, and I think he's had a little bit of a shaky start this year. And I don't want to absolve him completely of that, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he knows that they're not going to be competitive on a regular basis. Some other players may have been victim of that too. As far as they're trading good players, I have had an issue with this for a bit, and I've kind of voiced my frustration with the fact that they traded Laramie Tunsil for the potential for more Laramie Tunsils down the line. But I want to give them a fair chance for to see this through. And I think that, I think it's for, as writers, as reporters, I can voice my opinion on it, but I'm not going to throw away, completely get rid of them or their plan without seeing it through. So I'm going to give Chris Greer his chance. I'm going to give Brian Flores his chance to kind of see this rebuild through, see how it works, this processing that they're calling it, and see if it works. The Sixers are contenders now, so maybe it works out for them the same way. But there are a lot of holes on this team, and Tua's not going to fix them all. So I kind of have had some of the frustrations that I believe that you had as far as getting rid of these established players, especially young established players. But this is their plan. Picks and money is going to guide them starting in 2020. So that's what they're moving for going forward. Real quick, let me see what you guys, if there's any other questions, and then I will go ahead and jump to my next topic. Let's see. I see. Oops. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. Talking about where I live. I'm actually not in Brickell. I'm in Edgewater. But yeah, no, ESPN treats me well. Appreciate y'all. I got a comment here. Someone's asking about a non-Dolphins related question. Projection between the Eagles and Cowboys game on Sunday night game. I'm excited for that one. I love NFC East. I love NFC East football. I think that game, too, I've been on record of saying that I don't believe in the Cowboys. I think they're pretenders. I think that the way they're built around Ezekiel Elliott puts a lot of pressure on Dak Prescott, essentially to be the guy. And I don't think that's where he's at his best. So I think Philadelphia wins that game. A close one, maybe a touchdown game. But I really like that Eagles team, even though that they've been banged up and they haven't really played well, particularly in the secondary. Amari Cooper might not play for the Cowboys, so I don't know if they have the weapons to tear up that Eagles defense like a lot of teams have. That's a Swiss cheese defense, by the way, and I think they really need to go get a corner. especially the defensive backs, not their defense, but the defensive backs. So, but I do think the Eagles win that game. So, appreciate that question. Real quick, I wanted to share with you guys. I know Thursday Night Football is about to come on. Brian Flores and Frank Gore played against each other. And I don't know about you guys, but I thought that was really interesting for me. We kind of learned that this week. We went into kind of a wormhole, and this is kind of my inside the media room, locker room moment of the week. For y'all have watched Howling with the Wolfe every week, we kind of have these nuggets every week where I try to take you guys inside of my world and what's interesting to me that may not be something that we write about. But Brian Flores played college football at Boston College, and Frank Gore played at the University of Miami. Frank Gore is 36. He plays for the Bills. The Dolphins are playing the Bills this week. So I asked him about Frank Gore, and he told a story about how he played against him in college and how Clinton Portis was there. And essentially, Frank Gore came about, and, they thought, like, what is this freshman doing? We didn't think that he was going to, we thought we were going to have a drop-off when Clinton Portis, we thought it was going to be a drop-off when Clinton Portis came in, and Frank Gore came in, and he was pounding them just as good. And we went to the tape in 2003, not the 2001 game that he was talking about with Ed Reed, where he had the touchdown that he ran back, and Miami went and won the national championship. But in 2003, Brian Flores' last year in college, and I think Frank Gore's last year in college, both of them played prominent roles. And we watched the game on YouTube. If you guys want to check it out on YouTube, 2003, Boston College versus Miami. They had a few opportunities where Brian Flores got a chance to go heads up with Frank Gore. There's one where Brian Flores got the better of Frank Gore. We asked him about it. I asked him about it in the media room today. And he was trying to hide. He was trying to be modest. Brian Flores was trying to be modest. But eventually he said he got a tackle on one of the greatest running backs to ever play. And he took some excitement in that. The fact that he got a chance to tackle Frank Gore. So I thought that was cool. There's a chance, just for you guys, there's a chance I may do a story on that and maybe Brian Flores' playing career at some point in the future. I got to figure that out. But I thought that was really cool, just the fact that, we're covering a coach who's playing against a player who played against each other. So Frank Gore did get the better of him several other times. But for Brian Flores' sake, we're not going to discuss about those too much. But yeah, Brian Flores did get a hit on Frank Gore, and I thought that was really interesting, and he kind of got a chuckle out of it. I think some of the players may have seen it in the locker room. He said he wasn't going to share it with them, but some of the players may have seen it, and I wonder if they're going to give him a little bit of jokes on that. So I thought that was fun, and that's kind of my thoughts on that. One more question about the Cowboys. Is Jason Garrett's job in jeopardy? I don't cover the Cowboys, so I can't tell you from insider perspective, but I'd say whenever you let a coach go into his lame duck year, which is what the Cowboys have done, Jason Garrett is in his final year of his contract. That to me essentially tells you that there's some uncertainty about whether he's the guy, and I can't see Jason Garrett returning as the Cowboys coach if they don't make the playoffs. I think if they miss the playoffs, that is sort of the stake in Jason Garrett's career, and they kind of move on with a different coach. If he makes the playoffs and they lose a first-round game, I can still see him gone. So I think they probably need to make the playoffs and maybe even win a playoff game for Jason Garrett to be safe. So that's kind of my opinion, my educated opinion. But there's a couple Cowboys writers that I follow that I may try to get a scoop on and see what they think. Sean Payton was the rumored guy that always to go to Dallas, but he signed an extension in New Orleans, so he's not going to end up in Dallas. But that team has locked up a lot of money and a lot of players at offensive line. Now Zeke, Dak's got to get paid too. Amari Cooper's got to get paid. So they're going to be capped out soon. So they're going to have to win now soon or they're never going to win. So that's kind of my thoughts on the Cowboys, and that's probably why I'm not super high on them now for this season. So real quickly before I leave, I promised you guys kind of give you an assessment of what I think of the AFC East at this point. Let's start with at the top, the Patriots. At some point, Bill Belichick and Tom Brady are going to retire, but until then, they're the class of the NFL and definitely the class of the AFC East. I think one thing that I'm really intrigued about, for them long term, is does Bill Belichick and Tom Brady retire at the same time? Is that kind of a two-man system? Whenever one goes, does the other go? We kind of had that question about Greg Popovich and Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan retired, but Greg Popovich stays. who retires first. And when one of them retires, we're going to really get a chance to see how the other one survives without the other one. So I can't imagine seeing Tom Brady playing without Bill Belichick. I can see Bill Belichick coaching without Tom Brady. But this team, the way Bill Belichick, as long as Bill Belichick's a coach there, I think they'll still be the class of the AFC East. I think that he's a really good head coach. And I think that the rest of the teams in the division sort of just got unlucky that they got stuck with Belichick and the Patriots. So they're the class, and I think there's, even though they have older people at the top, I think their future is still uber bright. I think the second team that I think I actually like a lot better than some other people, I really like the Buffalo Bills. They're playing them this week. I think the Buffalo Bills have a really, really good direction. I'm not sold on Josh Allen yet. Maybe he can, could make me a believer this week, this Sunday, and going forward. But that's the one question I have on this team. I think they're an elite defense, top 5 defense in the league. I love Frank Gore in that backfield, but I love Devin Singletary, the young back they have behind Frank Gore, who's I think is going to be the man after Frank leaves or retires. And I think they have a lot of pieces to be a team that's at least a playoff contender for years to come. The Jets with Adam Gase, I was really worried about Adam Gase and potentially being a one and done for a while. But Sam Darnold's come back, and they look like they breathe new life into them. So I'm a little worried about their long-term direction because I think there's a lot of holes on that team, particularly on the offensive line. And I'm really curious on, how much, leeway that Adam Gase is going to get to build this team. That was sort of his Achilles heel, I think, in Miami. I think he is a lot better as a play caller and a schemer than he is as a personnel guy and decision maker. So I hope he lets Joe Douglas really build that team. And if he does, then maybe they have a brighter future. But I like the Dolphins' long-term future, honestly, better than I like the Jets' long-term future. I'm a little skeptical about how this rebuild is going to work out because, there's been kind of an inconsistent draft history with Chris Greer in their front office. But I love that they went out and got Reggie McKenzie and Marvin Allen. And I think that we owe Chris Greer a chance to kind of see what he does with this stable of picks. He's never had this bounty of picks before and this much money before and a clean salary cap. So I'm eager to see what him and Brian Flores do in tandem over the next 2-3 years. I'm obviously here, so I hope they succeed and get a lot of stars here so that we can be doing a lot of hits on ESPN about all the star power and Dolphins being contenders for year to come. So I think there's a lot of GMs that would love to be in the Dolphins position with all the resources they have. So funny enough, I'm actually high on the AFC East's long-term future. I think that I would put the direction of the teams, at a position where, the Patriots have obviously been a class of this conference for a long time, but I'm really intrigued to see what the Dolphins do with all this money, all these picks, and kind of giving a new lease on building this franchise. So that's kind of my discussion on the AFC East and, looking forward. So as always, guys, thank you for joining Hollow the Wolf. Y'all go ahead and watch some good football. Chiefs and Broncos. I'm eager to see, what Patrick Mahomes does against Von Miller and them boys. So thanks as always for tuning in, and I'll see y'all next week.